Welcome back, my friends, to the show that never ends. We're on Novice once again. Let us stride, let us stride. And today's episode is brought to you by Demike, a commenter from the last video. And Demike asked, how do I make a bus like this? Is there a tutorial somewhere? So, Demike, this is for you and for anyone else who would like to design their own bus/base. I assume that you mean the entire base structure, not just the bus, because the bus is very easy. The bus is just a series of belts in a straight line, like this. There's your tutorial. Put 4 belts in a row, leave a space of 2, put 4 belts in a row, leave a space of 2, etc., etc. Leave plenty of room on the top and bottom for more belts and expansion. And there you have it. That's how to make the basic bus. And then it's just a matter of pulling your items off of the bus, typically in a single direction, like to the north here. Sometimes you might go north and south, as I am. But here is how you begin the whole process. All right, so back to wherever I am, which is, I don't remember. There I am. Okay, back to this. How to bus. So what I've done is I've created a series of bullet points here that we can see in map view, and they are right here. So we're going to go down the list one at a time, and then we will go through each item individually one at a time with a little bit of commentary and explanation. So item 0 is, first of all, find a nice clear place to work. So typically what I do is I move outside of my robot coverage area and clear a spot, something like I have done here. And then I would actually, if I was going to do this from scratch, which I am, I would go ahead and remove all of these Robo Ports so that we don't have interference from the base bots. Because sometimes it can be kind of annoying to have the base bots swoop in to do the work for you right about the time that you get started on your design process. So this way you eliminate that issue so that it's only your personal bots doing the work for you. Okay, so that is item 0. Item 1 is decide on a rule set. Okay, so I'm going to just read the list right now, and then we'll go back through these things one at a time. So number 1, decide on a rule set. Number 2 is to start with train track, and we'll go into the reasons for that in just a minute. Number 3 is to add your power poles and your robo ports. Number 4 is to create a blueprint book. Number 5 is learn to use blueprint snapping. Number 6 is create blueprints and your options. And finally, number 7 is leave plenty of room for expansion. Okay, so let's start with number 1. Decide on a rule set. Okay, for instance, my rule set for this base is that my bus will be a series of straight lines, as we have here. I can only build outside of the concrete area, which is set aside for the bus. So any production is outside of this concrete area. I can have belts traveling in any direction along the bus, as long as I leave room in the middle of the bus, basically, for the main production items. And anything like this, like side bus things, are okay as long as the item is only traveling a short distance. It saves me from running these batteries all the way across the bus and then down and then back across the bus again. So it's a little shortcut area. So basically this is my shortcut area in between these two power poles here. Then I have this gravel area. I always call it gravel, but it's stone brick area. Is for any like smelting and oil production and any side items like any oil products and things like that that don't necessarily need to go onto the bus but kind of are affected by the bus or contribute to other steps in the process. Okay, So that's my basic rule set for this playthrough. Now you will establish your own rule set, whatever that may be, but just kind of get that in your head before you get started on building your base. Okay, now number 2 is once you do that, start with a train track. And the reason for starting with a train track is because, as you'll see, train track is a 2x2 block. Okay, in other words, if you put a train track down versus a wall is a 1x1 block. In other words, it takes up 1 grid square. Train track takes up 2 grid squares, as you can see here. So that means that any time that you want to center something, you're always going to be working with an even center. And if you start with any other item, it's not going to work out for you, and somehow you're going to get jammed up. So the train track is kind of the central item in starting your bus, your grid-based bus, your base period, if you want it to work out. For one thing, you can't just place train track anywhere. When you start the game, you will have a position where you can have a train track, but you cannot, for instance, let's go back to the wall illustration again. As you can see, that train track is there, but I cannot place a train track in this position. Okay? There's absolutely no way to place a train track in that 2x2 grid space. So your train track is bound by the game engine itself, where it can and cannot go. And you want your tracks to be able to work around your power poles. Okay? So start with your train track and then add your power poles. All right? And number 3 is add your power poles and your Robo Ports. Okay, so once you get your train track established, for instance, when I started this base, I started with my my cloverleaf design. This was the first thing that I developed. Was I put down a track, decided on the width of my track, the distance between my northbound and southbound track, and my east and west track. I wanted to have that all the same. And so that's where I started. And then the power poles fit in after that. That way, you know that everything will work. Okay, now, sort of the part 2 to adding power poles and roboports, which is item number 3, 3.2, I guess, would be to decide if you want to have rotational symmetry or not. Now, I decided against rotational symmetry because I wanted my cloverleaf to be kind of the feature of my design, and I wanted to be able to work within the constraints of having a cloverleaf intersection. I also have these T-junctions. I have a northbound, a north-south, well, I call it an east-west junction, which connects to the south, and then I have an east-west, which connects to the north. Okay, and I'm limiting myself to those 3 intersection types. Now, you could have a north-south that connects to the east and a north-south that connects to the west, which would be 4 types of T-junctions, but I decided not to. I also decided on my train station layout, and I also added a stacker blueprint, which is here, and the stacker is expandable. So I've decided that these are my building blocks. So as you'll see, I have a mine that is here, but in order to access that mine, I need a turnaround. So I don't have a way to get, I don't have a northern train station that would be on the northern side of the track, nor do I have a north-south train station. I only have the west to east train station, and that's just my decision for my base design. I just wanted to limit myself in that way because it creates a bit of continuity. and it saves on the number of blueprints that I had to create. Because when you get into rotational symmetry, things can get a little bit difficult, especially when it comes to signaling your train tracks, because you have a difficult time with, like I said, the 2x2 center, because train tracks are 2x2 block. It's extremely difficult to achieve rotational symmetry. It is possible, but it takes a lot of work, and I just wasn't willing to put that kind of time and effort into my intersections to have rotational symmetry. So I limited myself in another way. So there are limitations. No matter which way you go, there are going to be limitations. So you have to decide on the limitations that you're willing to work with. So again, in my case, I am willing to work with a single cloverleaf design with 2 intersection designs, a single train station design, which is editable. As you can see here, I have a single train station design, which is this one, this blueprint here, which looks like this, but I can expand it by adding a second different station on the end of it, or in another way that maybe I haven't thought of yet. Like here's one here where I added a second one 1 block away. And by 1 block, I mean one kind of city block is the basis of my my blueprint book here. But I use the same stacker, and I just have a secondary lane here for the second station. I could have easily just added a station here and done it as I did on this one, but for whatever reason, I decided to do this, and that's okay. It's my rules, so I can set my rules and then break my rules as I want to. But basically, I'm sticking with this design. Okay, so then number 4, yeah, and Robo Ports. Still on number 3, power poles and Robo Ports. So your Robo Port coverage is going to be, based on the size of your Robo Port. And if you go with quality Robo Ports, you can expand your Robo Port network. And also, if you went with quality power poles, you can expand your power pole coverage. So you have to decide kind of beforehand if you're going to go that route. Like if I wanted to upgrade the entire base to, say, legendary substations, then I would have to adjust all my blueprints to fit that. But I'm going with just standard substations and standard roboports, and so that kind of determined the size of my grid. Well, to be honest, the size of the grid was determined by the cloverleaf, but then I just fit the power poles to match the grid, as you'll see there. And I went ahead and marked them out with concrete to make it easier on my eye to see that everything is lining up. Okay, that brings us to number 4, is to create a blueprint book. Now, if you don't know how to do this, all you have to do is you can either hit the B button, which brings up your blueprints, and that gives you a list of all of your blueprints so that you can see them right there. Secondly, you can go here in your hotbar, and if you press these 3 buttons here, it'll give you the option to have your blueprint books appear there. Also your blueprints, deconstruction planners, etc. All your options are there. So I leave that toggled on so that if I want to create a blueprint book, I simply hit this button, and there's my new blueprint book. And there's a funny little feature of blueprints that when you create them, they are not an entity in the game until you put them in your inventory. Once you put them in your inventory, they become an entity in the game. Now that blueprint book is there and only there. But if I put it here instead, and then by hitting the B button, I put it in my blueprints, and I place it, say here on the end, or even in the next row here. Now that blueprint book only exists in my blueprints folder. Okay, and I can name that book by right-clicking, and I can give it a name right here, and this will be my test book. Okay, and now that blueprint book is called test book, and it lives right here in my blueprints at the end, right there. Okay. Now, when you right click on it, you have access to all the blueprints in there. And in order to create a new blueprint, I would hit this button here, the blueprint button, and then click and drag to create a blueprint like this bus here. And then I can name this blueprint bus logo, say, and I can set all of my icons for it. I can spell out the word bus if I want to, just to remind me of what this is. BUS, we're going with bus like that. And then create that blueprint. And then I right click on my blueprint book and left click to place it there. Now, once again, I can access that blueprint either by right clicking the blueprint book and then taking it out, and it will return to there. When I hit Q to get out of it, it will return to my blueprint book, or I can left click on it, place it. I can place it into my hotbar so that I have quick access to it if I want to do that. I can middle click on my hotbar to delete it from there, but it stays inside my blueprint book. Okay, so once it's in my blueprint book, it will be there forever until I delete it. And I would delete it by right clicking on it and clicking the red button right there. Okay, so that is how to deal with your blueprints. So once you have your blueprints, you want to remember to either place them in your inventory or in a blueprint book. I would highly recommend that you create a blueprint book and place your blueprints into the blueprint book. And then the ones that you're going to use more often, you place in your hotbar, but they are always inside the blueprint book so that they're not actually in your inventory. As you can see here, I have a few temporary blueprints in my inventory only, like this one here. I haven't added to a blueprint book yet, but that's just a turnaround. It's not a big deal. It's an easy one to redesign if I have to. A couple of temporary blueprints that I'm not planning to put in a blueprint book, but for the most part, they exist inside of my blueprint book. Okay. All right. So that leads us to number 5. Learn to use blueprint snapping. Okay. So once you decide on a grid pattern, a Robo Port pattern, and or a rail pattern, you're going to want to make sure that the blueprint is snappable. So in other words, if I take any one of these blueprints in hand, like this one, okay, give me one of them. There we go. You'll notice that it snaps into position and it always lines up. I don't have to ever worry about, I could place it anywhere on the map. I could go way out here in the middle of nowhere and place it out here, and I know that it will line up with the rest of my blueprints. When I build out to that position, it will always line up. Okay. And the way that you do that is once you establish your grid pattern or whatever size that you're working with, you start by creating a new blueprint. And that's the reason that I use concrete to mark my grids, is to give me a good starting point that I can see where my pattern begins. So if I go here, you'll see that I'm highlighting those concrete blocks there, which means that I'm getting the grid pattern that I want to have. In other words, I want the grid to be one block of concrete. And you'll see that even my train track stops just shy of that. So everything that is inside of this, there we go, that gives me that mark. Now I no longer can see the concrete, and that's because there are other items, other entities in the blueprint. You have the option when you create a blueprint to either choose tiles only. You can choose tiles, which is fine, but as soon as you hit an entity, the entity will override the tile selection as far as what it is preferring to blueprint. Okay, but when I finish the blueprint to here, now I'm going to get my entire grid pattern, and then what I have to do is hit tiles here, hit the tiles button, and that gives me my tiles. And now I know that my blueprint encompasses all of the tiles, all of the Robo Ports, and all of the power poles that are inside my blueprint. And then when I want to make sure that this works with my grid pattern, I click Snap to Grid. Boom, and that puts it into the absolute position, so that now, as you can see here, the border encompasses the entire blueprint. And when I create the blueprint, now you'll see that it fits perfectly into my grid pattern. And I can move that anywhere on the map, and it will always work in the same way as all the rest of my blueprints. Okay. Now, if for whatever reason you select a different section of the blueprint and you want it to match, then you'll have to go in and manually adjust the position. Like, say I wanted to just take the Robo Ports portion from Robo Port there to Robo Port there. Okay, now it just goes from Robo Port to Robo Port inside the same grid. Now I can do Snap to Grid once again. And then I would have to adjust the absolute position so that it matches with the rest of my grid, which I would do sort of by trial and error, as you'll see here. If I do create blueprint, okay, actually that is, no, it's not matching. See, as you can see, it flops. It matches in that position, but then it flops because it's off by that number of tiles, whatever that number of tiles is between that RoboPort edge and that edge right there, which is, say it's 12 tiles. Let's see. So then what I do is I put that blueprint into my hotbar temporarily. I right click on it, and then I simply adjust the X and Y position until it matches with the rest of my grid. Okay, so if I adjust the X to say minus, let's say 12, you'll see that it expands out to the left by 12, and then I would have to adjust my Y position by minus 12. I'm just estimating here, okay? And then I would have to adjust my entire grid, because now you can see it's offset to the top and the left by 12 tiles in either direction. That means I have to increase the size of the grid by, what is that, 118. So if I add 12 to that, I would get 130. And that's not quite enough. I have to add 12 more, so that would make it 142. There we go. And now it matches. And then this should also be 142, say. I'm just estimating. I don't know if that's the right size or not. And then grab that and see if we work out. And as you can see, it does not. So it's just a matter of finding the right numbers to put in there to make that line up. Now, if I could remember where I started, it should match into the one that I started on. If I could remember where I started with this thing, I believe it should fit in there. But yeah, it's just a matter of trial and error to get it to where you want it to be. And then when you're done with it, you can either save it or delete it. Okay, but the easiest way to do it is to just start with your basic grid size and always work with that. That way you don't have to mess with all that tinkering. Okay, number 6 then is to create your blueprints and your options. Okay, so once you've done all that, you've established your pattern and you've set your first blueprint, then go ahead and, like, if you start with your clover leaf, then go ahead and decide on what other train track blueprints you want to have. For instance, I had my straights, my horizontal straights, my vertical straights, and my T intersections. So I designed each of them, made them fit within the grid, and then created each of those blueprints. And if there was going to be more blueprints in the book, I would decide on all those, get all those done, and get your entire set of blueprints done before you start building your base. That way you have all of your pieces, kind of like a Lego set. You have all the pieces that you're going to work with gathered together, and you go with that. So for instance, I have my wall section blueprint here, which I didn't do a complete wall set, and I didn't snap it to the grid either, but it does fit with my my basic grid layout. So I can place it on a power pole and line it up with any power pole. That way I don't have to worry about being like if I don't want to go with an extra full grid, like here I didn't really need a full grid to go just into this lake. So this way it's a little bit flexible. I can just place this down anywhere, but it does match up with the power poles. Okay, but I do have some flexibility in it. So that's another option that you have as far as your walls go. You don't necessarily have to have like a perfect corner for your walls. You can adjust those on the fly, or you can build every single blueprint that you want to have. You can have your corner pieces already done, and the more that you do that fits to the grid and snaps into place, then the easier it is to expand your base. But I like to have a bit of flexibility on it, so that's why I went with that route. All right, that brings us then to number 7, which is to leave plenty of room. Now that is specifically about your bus design. So you've got your base done, you get your entire grid down, you get your train track in, you get your mines done, you start to bring your trains in, and then you start to build your bus, which you will have your smelting. Typically your bus starts with your smelting area. So you bring your stations in, you unload into your smelting area, and then you bring your bus lanes up, and then leave yourself a buffer room to make additions to your bus, because now unless you calculate from the beginning that you want to have 16 lanes of iron and 18 lanes of copper and 9 lanes of steel, etc., unless you calculate all that in the beginning, which is one way to do it. If you want to get out the rate calculator and figure out exactly how much materials you want to have based on your science needs, then do that and then base your bus on that. But if you're going to go with kind of a bus that you're going to estimate, I'm going to have, like I want to have 4 lanes of iron, 4 lanes of copper, 2 lanes of steel, 2 lanes of green circuits. And I know that I need stone and coal and iron for different things. Then basically lay out your bus and leave yourself room to expand. So I have all of this room north of the bus and south of the bus for expansion, and that should be enough room. Now if as you proceed down your bus, like for instance I'm moving to the west and I have all of my manufacturing outside of the concrete area, but say I get to the end of the bus here and I decide that my last manufacturing is, say, here, and by the time I get to here, then my bus is full and I have another full set of lanes, something like this one, something like this. As you can see there, I have placed that particular belt is in the wrong place. This one here, for some reason, is in the wrong place. I miscounted somewhere. So I'll move that one over later and get it back into line. Because it should be four lanes with a gap of 2 and 4 lanes with a gap of 2. And I think what I did was when I put in my pipes, I didn't allow for 4 lanes of pipes there, and so I put that one in the wrong place. I think it needs to go north, but I'll have to work it out, figure out where it goes. But anyway, let's say that you get to the end of your bus and you decide that your bus is all the way up here now. You've got so many lanes of things that you're all the way up here. Then what you can do is when you expand out this way, just increase the size of your bus by another block or 2. From that point forward, and then your bus will just grow as you move to the west, which is fine. It's your bus. You can do as you please instead of having to go back and redesign your bus. But if you don't leave yourself enough room, you're going to make it really hard on yourself. Okay, so I think that covers all the basics of building a grid base and building a bus. If I've left anything out, or if you need more explanation on things, please leave me another comment and let me know what I missed, what I've done wrong, or if you have a question, a complaint, or whatever, do that in the comments. But that's it for this episode. Thank you guys very much. Thank you, Demike, for the question. And I hope you guys use this information and go on and make your own happy little bus. That's it for now. Thanks so much for watching. We'll see you next time. Bye-bye.